Hello there. Today we're going to be taking a look at create a team, and more precisely, we're going to be jumping into create a team, and the goal is just surviving our first season. So this is the surviving team. We're going to be picking the create your own origin. So this can kind of apply to everything because we're picking the worst of everything. But basically, the point of this video is it's going to give you a framework which you can use if you are struggling to survive your first season in terms of the financial aspect, because Create Team does give you a lot less money your first season than the other mode. And if you do enjoy this video, please go ahead and like and subscribe, as that helps me out a ton. But yes, goal, survive. Let's see if we can do it, and basically just do a little bit of a framework here. So we're going to start with the worst of everything, our facilities, car, and our starting balance. And we're also going to go ahead and into the facilities, and we're going to switch from the design center to the factory. The reason why we're doing this is a level 1 factory gives you 2 manufacturing slots. A level 2 factory gives you 3, which is going to make it a lot easier to make parts. It's going to be quite important this year. So let's get that done. Other than that, you can go ahead and say take away the boardroom, put it into memorabilia if you want a little bit of an initial mentality buff. We're going to put it into hospitality area, as that is a marketability buff, and also quite an expensive building. So that is why we're doing it like so. But yeah, point in factory, point in hospitality, but this one is basically up to you. If you really want to do memorabilia room, feel free. If you want to do a level 2 weather sense to start off with, you can do that as well. You can even bring this down to level 0, but I like to have it at least level 1. Next up, we're going to be picking the staff and drivers, and as I mentioned here, we're going to be going down to level 1. So you get quite variance here from Flourish to, say, Bearman and any of the others. We're going to be picking Bearman. I still think he's a hugely great pick this year because of age. Hajar, same thing. And we're also going to be picking a little bit of a younger one as well here, to see if we can get into a little bit of problems with the car. Generally though, I wouldn't recommend picking anyone who has 70 overall, because they're just going to be crashing a lot. So we'll give Ashore a go. He's been a pick from last session case, but basically after you pick your drivers, we're going to do the same for staff, go down to 1 rating. And here's the thing, you can find real life staff, but you might also find some, random roles. And here's the thing, if you really want to be make your life a little bit easier on the, level 1 difficulty, if you will, you can go ahead and toggle on the generated and see if you find someone who's slightly higher rated than the current ones, because as soon as you get around 80, 85, the malus for other staff drops off massively. Basically, 77 rated, basically the drivers, the staff, for the most part, they're going to hate each other. You can have a bad mentality starting point. That's kind of what you are going to be playing with when it comes to surviving your first season, with everything kind of minimized. Engines, the best here for surviving just the first year is to pick the Mercedes engines. And the reason for this is, again, financial. They have the highest durability. It's going to make your life a lot easier because your parts won't, explode immediately. Red Bull is going to be more performance, but on the flip side, you're going to have way less durability, and that might be an issue. You could also run Renault engines with their maximum fuel efficiency and always run your engine in low mode. But we're going to be also simming a lot of this first year, so we're going to be picking Mercedes engines because, again, durability. Now, 14 branding, I'm just going to get this sorted quick, but you can do whatever you want. So here we are for the settings. We are Survivor. We're an experienced manager, and we're going to be playing this on hard to make it a little bit more interesting. Keep in mind, this is still the edition where the AI is only developing under full suspension, which is going to make it a little bit easier. But honestly, with the limited amount of funds that you have with your team here, you're probably going to be basically doing the same thing anyways for the most part. Now, as you can see, we are starting with a mostly negative mentality, which isn't that surprising. So we're going to use our initial funds to the 2 million to get started on some parts. And I would recommend starting with the underfloor. And we're still going to be focusing on cornering, but we're going to be limiting just how much we build, particularly compared to the Sauber video, well, because we don't have as much money. So for the first one here, safety time, put drag reduction and airflow sensitivity to the bottom. We keep downforce maxed. We also minimize weight. I'm going to go ahead here and spend engineers to speed this up. You could rush it, but I don't feel the cost is worth it, particularly when not doing so, it's actually going to allow you to make another part. And in our case here, we're actually just going to get started on the chassis. It takes a long time to make, so making it early is beneficial. Here too, we're going to minimize lifespan because it's still going to be, 4 to 8 races before it breaks, which is quite a lot. And you get such a huge amount of top speed, as well as high speed, medium speed, and low speed cornering. We're going to lose some engine cooling, but we'll get that back in the side pods. And DRS effectiveness doesn't seem to be too important this year, apart from maybe quali. So we're going to go ahead and do this. It might get fixed later on. If it has, take a look at the top comment, and I might have fixed it. We're going to use all of our engineers currently on this because we don't have money anymore. But we're going to get a sponsor package in 6 days. And this is going to be the most important financial decision that you're going to be making in this whole save. So let us speed along to it. And the reason why I say this is the most important financial one is because right now we have no money. We need to see if we can get ourselves a sponsor package that gives us a decent chunk of upfront funding. And we're actually pretty lucky here. We get a 3-star sponsor offer. We also have Arcoa, which also gives a bunch of upfront funding. I think what we're going to do here is we're going to go for the maximum amount of funding we can get, because that's going to give you a lot of spending money to upgrade your facilities and have an easy time to be more competitive in the second season. So again, depending on who you pick, make sure that they at least offer you some sort of upfront funding. And if you don't like any of the options, you can kind of re-roll by going back and starting the create team process anew. Secondly, we'll be looking for, of course, some more upfront funding, but we'll also be looking at the total amount. And this is actually a pretty good offer here. It's not a ton of money compared to the rest here, but we don't really lose out much by picking them. Next up, we're going to be picking some of the... This one is also good. Gives you a little bit of everything. Tracker also do have the energy drink cameo, which means that the engagement funds that you get from them is actually through the mandatory activities. Next up, let's see what other options we have. I think we're just going to pick basically the ones that pay us out the most. Here, Henrik, we have a wind tunnel hire. Again, you should be getting this money from that mandatory activity. That's basically how these contracts mainly work. Going to get the Miram coin here. This is going to be through the sponsor plans because there's no mandatory activity. And for Serpent here, a lot of extra race day money, which, let's be honest, we should be able to get after our first round of upgrades. So come China, come Miami, you should be able to get the race day funding even while simming pretty consistently, unless, of course, your drivers crash. So this is actually a pretty insane funding cap for the start here. And it seems to be the case with if you go hospitality area, you get the chance of getting better sponsor packages, which is why we do that building immediately, because we get so much more extra money over the course of a season. Now that we have money, we can actually get started on upgrading some of our other parts. So we're going to take 2 engineers off the chassis project, and we're going to be putting them on the side pods, which is where we're going to get our cooling back. We're going to go airflow middle and engine cooling, and that's going to be it. We're going to lose some top speed, but the amount of engine cooling that we get back is actually quite insane here. You can see that 13.28%. We get cornering, we lose top speed, but again, top speed doesn't seem to be too important this year, like last. Cornering seems to be the thing to go for first, and once you kind of max your cornering gains, you can start making designs that have max cornering and max top speed to compensate. But honestly, for this first year, we have very limited money, and I'll go over the cost cap in just a second and why that is. But yeah, we have limited money, so you need to make some pretty harsh choices here in favor of cornering, I'd say, rather than top speed. Fast suspension, low speed, tire preservation, airflow front. Tire preservation is basically tire cooling or, brake cooling from last year. So it's nice to at least have it over 40%, I'd say. Now, as I mentioned, surviving your first year is going to be hard financially more so than anything. And that is because if we go into the cost cap here, we have 63 million remaining at the start of the season. That is less than half the cost cap remaining. The reason for this is that for create a team, you spend an extra 32 million on car part development before the season starts compared to any of the regular 10 teams. So with that in mind, you have 30 million less to spend on developing your car over the course of a season. So with that in mind, making sure that your car parts, your powertrain components, so you don't have to buy extra, trying to ensure that your drivers don't crash a lot is going to be key to succeed. So do keep that in mind. But yeah, we have the worst car here by far, and we'll try and get a little bit better here with a couple of pretty terrible drivers. Now, if you are going to be playing the races manual, or if you're going to be simming, there's going to be a couple of different strategies, which we'll hop into in a second. But before that, we're going to have to set up our sponsor plan. Currently, we're not making any components. The factory, advert factory tools here are perfect. We'll take those. It's going to slow down the making of parts a little bit, but it's fine. And I really, really not recommend doing anything that lessens the driver's mentality, because they're far more likely to crash if you do. And, well, if they crash, you're not going to have a good time. Race weekend hospitality is going to increase the pit crew fatigue a little bit. It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, particularly this early. Try and avoid engineer's promotional tour currently, because it seems like they might not come back ever. Might be a little bit of a glitch. Probably the same for the scouts, so do try and be a little bit careful with that. And as you can see, we're actually kind of struggling here to reach our engagement cap. And we do need to reach the engagement cap every week, because this is a lot of money for a team that doesn't have any. So we want to do that. Now, for your first couple of races here, I wouldn't recommend start upgrading your facilities yet. Every time you upgrade a facility, your drivers are going to get a temporary mentality buff. And while Bashor here is positive at the moment, which makes him a little bit better, the mentality buff can be quite strong, and it's going to be quite important once we actually start scoring points. So for the time being, we don't want to mess with that, basically. Also, another thing to keep in mind, your affiliates are usually on pretty insane contracts, particularly compared to your drivers. So as you can see, we're paying Christian Mathieu 5 million this year, 64 overall. And if we look at the team members, we pay 2 million to Behrman, and we pay a little bit less than that to Bashor. So your affiliates are actually better paid than your drivers, and this is also something you can somewhat reroll. But if you can afford it, firing them could be beneficial. Now, for now, we do have a lot of money, so you might be tempted to fire them at the moment. But let's face it, we're going to be doing a lot of upgrades. We're going to need to make these parts, and we're also going to be upgrading facilities. So the reality of the situation is this money isn't really going to last a long time, and you might even have less. So do keep that in mind. If you can get rid of your affiliates, at least those that are, highly paid, it could be a very, very good idea to do that. But as you can see, terminating this contract will cost us basically as much as we're paying this year in salary. And next year, it will be kind of cheaper to fire her. We might want to terminate Mathieu's contract here. But let's face it, we're going to get this money over the course of a season. Rather pay this out over the course of a season. And particularly early on, money is more valuable than later on, I'd say. So for now, we're just going to keep them. But with that, we're going to head into the first race weekend. And I'm going to talk a little bit there about what you can do when you do races manually in order to avoid crashes that might ruin your whole season and potentially your whole save. So we're going to talk a little bit about here in Bahrain on what you can do to avoid having basically season-ending crashes. And there's actually a very simple trick. It's just going into your drivers here and telling them that they should be low on their overtake aggression, which does, of course, lessen the chance of an overtake, but it also lowers the risk of spin, lockups, and collisions as a whole. Same here for the defend approach. We will be, less defensive, but we'll also lower the risk of lockups and corner collision. That doesn't really have much of an effect on lap time. But basically, both of these things do ensure that your drivers don't do silly overtake maneuvers. They don't send it hard into corners, and generally just makes your life a little bit easier. Now, in the first race of the season, if you do have terrible drivers and a terrible car, you are most likely going to be ending 2 laps down for probably the first couple of races. So there's nothing wrong with just basically taking these as, more of a calm experience, just driving around, not really doing much. Because, again, you can save your powertrain for later by lowering the powertrain temperature, by running calm and collected. There isn't really much more to it than that. It's basically just turning down the defend approach and the overtake aggression, because these have a fairly high effect on how often your drivers crash. It seems insane just how often the drivers crash with these settings on. And if you want to take it one step further, you can actually go don't fight teammate for one of your drivers. That way they should be a little bit more careful about, crashing into each other. You could also have one push at the beginning to create a little bit more of a gap between them. But generally, there isn't really much more you can do aside from this in order to try and avoid incidents. And particularly, again, for your first 2, 3, 4 races, you aren't going to be scoring points. So there's no need to take any risks. I understand that's probably a little bit boring, but it is the truth. You can play incredibly safe, save your engine, save your tires, save your drivers, save everything. And once you are a little bit more competitive, you'll have a slight advantage. and probably also won't have a couple of destroyed cars. Now, simming is going to be a different kettle of fish. I wouldn't really recommend it until they get at least positive, maybe even enthusiastic mentality, as they do still tend to crash a lot while you sim. So yeah, this is basically what you're going to be seeing for your first couple laps, first couple of races if you survive. You're going to be a couple laps down, and honestly, again, we're not really going to be competitive unless there's a safety car, and even then, we haven't lapped in most cases, so it won't be, it won't matter anyways. So the only thing you should be trying to do here is surviving your first couple races. You can underfuel the car to make it easier, but keeping everything on rally defend and low, even with low driver confidence here, has kept the shore clean, kept Birmingham clean, and that's kind of all you can ask for at least the first 3, I'd say, races. Once we have our underfloor complete, we're actually going to want to manufacture one, because as you can see, Melbourne is in 11 days, and we're going to rush 2 of them out. The reason for this is that we're going to aim at getting 18th or above as a race target, as that's going to allow for way more money to find their way into our pockets. And this is also probably where you'd like to start upgrading some of your other facilities. Now, because we use CFD on the underfloor, if we do the underfloor again, we're actually going to get a huge boost. But we've actually gone into the next CFD period by this point, and what we're going to go ahead and do here is actually start the work on the front wing. Now, the reason why we're doing the front wing is because low-speed cornering is still very powerful, and as you can see, by investing into our front wing here, just its ability to do low-speed corners, we can get a tremendous boost. Boost us up at least 8 places. So that is exactly what we're going to do. We're also going to be minimizing the lifespan on this first design, because let's face it, we're going to make another front wing design pretty soon. So having the lifespan be 1 to 2 races, probably a little bit too little. Let's just do this to be on the safe side. But yeah, we can do this to keep ourselves on the safe side. We're going to be making another design. So if we're lucky, we should just need 2 front wings of this design before we make another one. Because again, we're using CFD time. Going to be using engineers to speed it up, as that is the best option to do so. And once this project with the chassis is done in 7 days, we're actually going to get that second underfloor started. So that's going to be the goal. Yeah, let us see how we do in Australia with our upgrades. And at this point, I'm going to be simming most of this season, just to show you what you can do. If you do races manually, you'll probably end up scoring and doing a little bit better than what we're going to do in both in terms of parts damage, but also in terms of race results. So do keep that in mind. Simming does not seem to be better than the player in most cases, and you'll probably also pick up way more damage doing so, but we're going to give it a go here. We now have our chassis design completed, and we're going to go ahead and manufacture it. However, as you can see, it's going to take 10 days to get done, and if we want to, we can actually rush one for Suzuka. It's going to be way costly though, $275 just to do so. So what you can do is actually make one normal and one rushed if you want to be a little bit more competitive in Suzuka with the cornering, which honestly can pay out handsomely. So it might actually be something that we do. For now, just get one chassis made. And as I mentioned here, we are going to get started on that second underfloor. We could get started on the rear wing, but we're also planning to use CFD time on our rear wing in 42 days. So while getting one done here could be a very, very good boost for the time being, we aren't going to do that because we're just interested in surviving this first season. We're not necessarily interested in scoring a ton of points. So while the rear wing here would be a nice upgrade, it's not something that we are going to be interested in right now. We're going to wait until the next CFD period. And with that said, we are going to get started on that second underfloor. And if we maximize this now, you can see that we have gotten quite a lot more boost compared to last time. We're not really losing any top speed or dirty air tolerance at this point, getting a ton more cornering. This is going to be a pretty massive upgrade. You can, if you really want to, invest in some top speed, but the loss of cornering isn't really worth it for me personally. I'm just going to go ahead and do it normally, and we'll nab that one engineer that we have extra now, put him on the underfloor, because we're not going to really be doing anything with the other 2 projects here. Once the side pod and suspension are done, that's it. We're just going to manufacture them. So for the most part here, you aren't actually going to be running the sign project for the majority of the season, just because we can't afford it because of the lack of cost cap. However, at this point, we are getting to a point now where we can start to, score a little bit better. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade the memorabilia room, because that one gives you mentality boosts to start off with. We're also going to go ahead here and upgrade our team hub, because that too gives you a minor boost. It's not huge or anything, but for 800,000, I'd say it's worth it. And if you want to at this point, you can do things like Tour Center and Helipad, mainly because they are cheap to build. They're also fairly quick to build. And by building them, you'll be giving your drivers here a little bit of a boost. Currently, we're not really seeing it, but we'll see it probably after this. We can actually see it here now. The facility upgrade started. They get a little bit of a boost with on their mentality. And also over time, the facility debuff here will become more and more less, because it seems like they don't really care about what facilities you upgrade, just the total level of your facility. So you can upgrade the cheap ones, like the ones we have under operations, in order to help fight that malice. Now with that said, we are going to just speed along here now, because we are going to be looking for the underfloor, just the buff here and what we can expect. Then we're probably just going to sim through Australia. But yeah, once you have the underfloor, you can go ahead and go into your warehouse. You can put it on the car. And already this is going to make your car competitive for 18th place. Probably doesn't look like it, but we have high-speed cornering. We have not really a lot of medium. But again, this is going to make you more competitive in order to try and get that 18th place and a little bit of extra money. And in our case, that little bit of extra money is, I believe, almost 700,000 compared to 350,000. So, as you can imagine, once you can get the highest tier of race goal on the regular, your finances are going to be looking a lot better. So let's see if we can get it here in Australia. After simming our race here, we actually do beat the goal with for sure. We do fail with Bearman, so we probably need one more upgrade at this point to be competitive, which is what we're going to be getting going into Suzuka with that with the chassis. So honestly, at this point, financially, we're going to be looking a lot better, and we actually did get paid out the full amount, as you saw there. So something funky happened for sure. But yeah, at this point, again, we're just going to keep on upgrading these buildings. They're going to be done very quick. As you can see, the helipad here just takes a week to upgrade. Memorabilia room takes less than that, just 6 days. And that is kind of why I didn't want to fire our affiliate just yet, because you are going to be spending a lot of money just upgrading these 3 buildings in particular. And going into next year, you want to have your hospitality area maxed, because it's a huge buff to your team's marketability, and that's quite important to get a good sponsorship deal. That is why we kind of want to do that. Now, in our case, we've actually been quite lucky, but you probably have picked up a minor fault at this point if you have been simming. It's not a huge deal. It can be a little bit annoying, but I still recommend using your engine, your ERS, and your gearbox, probably down to orange levels of wear, unless you end up with an orange fault, which is going to slow you down quite a bit. But other than that, you should be, for the most part, fine. And at this point, again, we're just going to sit back, relax, allow these designs to finish, which they will in 3 days. And as you can see, we actually have room here to get both the side pod and the suspension done, one of them done before Suzuka, which is going to make us even more competitive. And that is kind of the goal of the upgrade schedule that we have. It is kind of set up that way in order to make it easy for us to be competitive as early as possible. So with that said, we aren't going to start any new projects, because again, both of these are CFD projects, so we'll just leave them as they are. We can now chuck a couple of extra souls to work on the underfloor. Next up, we're going to manufacture the suspension and underfloor, and while you could rush this, it's not going to be done in time for Suzuka, so just do them normally. You'll have one ready, and these are the ones that we're going to be using for the rest of the season for the most part. So just go ahead and make 2 to start off with, because that is what we need. And then as the positions open up and we have more manufacturing room, we can get the extras going as well. But for now, just 2 side pods and a suspension. And again, if you want both cars to be a little bit more competitive in Suzuka, you can rush a chassis if you feel like it. There's nothing wrong with it. It is a huge buff to the car. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead now and allow these things to be built, and then we'll see how the car stacks up from Suzuka. We're going to be way more competitive, and at this point, we're going to be guaranteed basically to get at least 18th with both cars for the remainder of the season. So here we are about to head into the Japanese Grand Prix, and if we take a look now at the warehouse, we now have a couple of chassis available, and these alone are going to bump us up a couple of ranks on the grid. We'll get them on the car. We also do have no wings yet, but they'll be coming. We have 1 side pod, which we'll put on whichever car is, more likely to score points. And we'll do the same here with the suspension. You can split them between the cars, but honestly, I would just install everything on one car and have one basically guaranteed car performing. And if we take a look at car 1 here now, 17th, 11th, 9th, At this point, your car should be basically guaranteed, even with its terrible top speed, to score 18th or higher. And again, that's kind of what we're aiming at. Second car isn't as good because it's still lacking side pods and suspension, but we'll get those. And once we actually also get the upgraded underfloor, the second edition, the front wing and a rear wing, going to be a lot more competitive and probably even score a couple of points. And honestly, that's really all we need to do for the first year to reach the board goals for the most part. In our case here, we don't have a high rating. The board doesn't really want us to do too well here, 9th or above, which is pretty simple, with just a couple of points. So unless your board expects more of you, you don't really need to do too much in terms of upgrading the car. Now, as mentioned here, this is going to allow these race targets to be far easier to complete. So let's see if we reach them here in Japan. So after simulating our race here in Japan, we actually end up 11th and 12th. It means that we're getting very close to the points. We did have some pretty good luck here though, because as you can see, these 4 cars did not DNF. And again, you are going to have to be a little bit lucky here in order to not get damage. But it's probably going to come later on and we can deal with that situation then. Pit crew is also going to be another thing that you need to worry about, but honestly, I'll have a pit crew guide out in the future, so that shouldn't be a big deal. In my case, I just focus on the error chance down to around 9-8%, and then we work on getting the pit stop times down to 2.6 seconds. Upgrade completed for the memorabilia room, and again here, we're just going to keep on upgrading these buildings, these 3 in particular. And with that, again, the mentality should get a buff. We're also going to make sure that the team hub at least goes up to level 2. That is quite nice to have. And at this point, we are getting a little bit of an issue. As you can see, we have picked a minor fault on the ERS. We haven't done that for car 2, but it's something that will be very common when you simulate, is that, again, you are going to be picking up, some minor faults. And that is going to just be the way things are. You're going to have to live with that. Now, regulation votes here can be kind of hard to deal with. In our case, we're going to get a pretty hard one that affects the entirety of the car. So, again, once you have all your parts, focusing on research is probably going to be your best bet, but you're still going to have to make some good choices in how you kind of handle that. So we'll be going over research once we actually have it open. But yeah, memorabilia room, focus on that. Just deal with things as they go. And by Japan here, because of the boost that we have to mainly facility upgrades, we have enthusiastic mentality. At this point, you can actually slow down the buildings a little bit, but this is already boosted Behrman up to a fairly decent driver. The same for Vashore. He also to get boosted up to a fairly decent driver. So do keep that in mind. It is good to focus mentality, but you'll have to deal with it in the best way you can. And Vashore here actually has a bonus to other staff, car performance and facility. So that's kind of interesting though, because they're basically just one overall between them, but as you can see, one's happy, one is very unhappy. So there's something funky going on with mentality. Probably going to need to dive a little bit deeper into that. Yeah, at this point you are basically stable. You'll be able to get a lot of money, and probably at this point you could potentially consider firing your affiliates. And honestly, we are going to go ahead and fire one affiliate here. We are going to be firing Mathieu because, again, the cost there, 4.8 million. The cost to terminate has gone down to 1.7. At this point, we're going to go ahead and terminate this contract. We're going to save a little bit of money over the course of the remainder of the year. And Corey here, we're still not going to really fire yet because, again, it's the same cost this year. We're going to lose that next year. But we're going to need this money mostly just to upgrade facilities. Now, if you have some lower tier drivers like we do here, rather young talents rather than lower tier, you can at this point go ahead and build the race sim. At least get the first level of it. That shouldn't be a big deal. It's going to help with the development. But at this point, there isn't really too much going on. We're going to get our front wing in today. Then we're going to design a new one. Kind of like we have been doing. We're also going to keep on building up the buildings here. But as I said, at this point, there's nothing wrong with slowing down a little bit. Just slowing down the buildings until you start seeing mentality issues again is perfectly viable. So that new front wing was the CFD version. So we want to make another one. And in 20 days, we're going to be making the rear wing. So already you can kind of see just how insane the buff here is to the low speed. And that buff is going to be even more insane once we have everything kind of maxed and sorted. Again, the front wings here do break quite often. So just doing 2 ticks of lifespan can be hugely beneficial for you. But we are getting, once this is done, 174 low-speed cornering, which is enough to make us the best team currently. There's probably some teams with damage out there on the grid. it's going to propel us up massively. So as you can imagine, getting your front wing up and running early, it's going to be a godsend. And honestly, I wouldn't really recommend Rush. You don't save a lot of time on it. And the first season, again, it's just survival. That's really it. All we need to do for this first season is just survive. We're also going to go ahead and manufacture these once we have time. As you can see here, the side pods will be done in time in 4 days. Gives us 6 days to get them made for China. So we're also going to have those new front wings on for China. Not going to be the super upgraded ones, but enough that we'll be a little bit more competitive. Now, in 5 days, we're also going to be getting that new, or rather the final edition underfloor. And that is also going to be a little bit of an important buff, but it's not going to be something that we want to rush. You're not going to need to speed up and make sure that you get that underfloor immediately. There's no need to do that. But it means that we now have basically kind of reached the limits of our designs. And what I mean by this is that all we need now is the front wing here, and then start on the rear wing in 20 days. You can make a rear wing before that, but we're just kind of trying to do the budget build here. So I wouldn't really recommend that. Next up, we're going to manufacture the front wings, and we're going to get them done in, again, just in time for China, for the most part. We might need to rush one of them, honestly. But yeah, we can rush one. It's pretty cheap to do so. That way you'll guarantee that you have them available for both cars in China. We're going to get the underfloor started on here, and with 16 days, we get them done for Miami. So again, no need to really rush, unless you really, really want to put it on your car before China to make one of them more competitive. And other than that, at this point, the only thing you need to do is just make car pieces. Try to make sure that you have in your warehouse 4 of every piece, maybe 6 front wings, and then you should be good. Now, if you have a lot of crashes, you might have to make designs that have a little bit better durability in order to save money towards the end of the season, but for now, we're fine and won't do that. So here we are with the car going into China, and as you can see, we're now very competitive for at least scoring the last couple of points in terms of cornering, 7th, 11th, and 9th. We're still going to get a couple more buffs here to these 3 cornering stats, because for one, we're still lacking the underfloor. It still needs to be made, so that is still not here. That is going to help out a little bit. And also the rear wing. Once we get that going, that's going to be a buff as well. And also the final edition front wing. So we still have a couple of buffs coming our way. And at this point, if you need to, or you feel like you want to be more competitive, you can do things like taking the side pods here and making another edition that has max cooling, has max kind of everything. And you'll lose out a little bit on your cooling, you'll lose out a little bit on your cornering, but you can get a load of top speed back and be a little bit more competitive there as well. You can do this, but honestly, if you are going to be playing, a little bit more financially safe, there's no need to do that. But you can take the suspension, the underfloor, the side pods, the parts that we have minimized drag reduction on, and get a little bit of that top speed back but by sacrificing some of your cornering. So do keep that in mind. It is possible to do so. You can potentially score a little bit better results with that. But honestly, at this point, we have kind of gotten to a point where we will be able to survive the season. And honestly, here's the thing that might be a little bit weird to think about. The only thing you need to do to survive your first season is just to hit the season objective. That's it. We're not really interested in doing anything else than this. So as long as you're 9th or above, the board won't care what you do unless, of course, you break cost cap, get it fined to oblivion, and just generally, fail in the races. But as long as we beat the season objective, the board won't care. So take care of your finances, do your best to reach the season objective, and that is basically it for surviving your first season. But it can be a little bit hard, and it can be a little bit, frustrating to leave these slots open. But it's generally what you have to do. You have lost a third of your spending cap before the season even began. So with that, you're going to have to save money somewhere else. And as you can see here, Damon is now trending back to a more positive overall mentality. Some of the facility upgrade buffs have started to fail, but he's also a little bit more happy with our facilities now. And we haven't really done anything huge in terms of upgrades. It could be the race sim, which of course would be nice to upgrade again. But as you can see, at this point, we have 4 million remaining. So we are getting down to the point where we spent that 20 million we had in the bank, and we are getting a little bit on the, lower side financially. So keep that in mind. It might look like you have a lot of money, but you aren't getting a lot of money this year. So you need to be more financially responsible, if you will. Don't just spend it immediately, because it's hard to get back again. But now though, we're going to start simming some of the races here and see how we perform. I'm still going to be jumping back and telling you with the front wing and the rear wing, and maybe how we do a little bit of research. But for now, we're going to be trying just to get ourselves to the end of the season in the safest way possible. And I am going to be simming everything. If our drivers crash out, I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into how you can fix that. It is going to happen. So we'll just have to deal with that once we get there. So we have reached our next ATR period. And with that, as mentioned, we are going to get started on the rear wing. So the rear wing in this year's game has a pretty huge buff on medium speed cornering. If it was available last year, then I missed out on it, and I apologize for taking away some of your medium speed cornering ability. But yeah, this year we are going to be focusing on, rather than DRS, we are going to be focusing on just top speed and medium speed cornering. Again, mainly just to get through this first season in the least painful way possible. Here too, you can do a couple of lifespan to the right in order to make sure you don't have to make too many rear wings. But as you can see, we are going to be losing a little bit of DRS effectiveness. Again, it's not a huge deal. It doesn't seem to be too impactful, particularly if you play the races yourself this year. And we're going to get a little bit of that top speed back. We're also going to be getting a load of medium speed. And again, we are going to be making another edition of this rear wing. So for now, we're just going to do it like this. We're going to put all of our engineers on it. We're not going to do rush. We're not going to do intense. We're going to be saving our money. Now, in 9 days, we are going to be getting our new front wing. But before that, we're going to have to head to Miami. So currently, we are looking at basically getting both of these new underfloors before then, which is going to boost our car a little bit on the high-speed corners. But honestly, again, it's a buff altogether. So let's see how the car looks once we actually get those parts on. So here we are with all but the second front wing, the new rear wings. And as you can see here, we are falling far behind on top speed DRS and at dirty air tolerance, but again, it doesn't seem to be too important this year, which is why we've allowed this to happen. But our cornering now is at a point where we can fight for a couple of points every now and again. Nothing too serious, but basically just where you want it if you start with the worst car and kind of the worst everything and create a team. Now, financially here, you can see that we just have 1 million in the bank. And while we have upgraded some of our facilities like the team up to level 2, the race sim to level 1, the helipad, the memorabilia room, and the tour center, these aren't really that expensive. For instance, the hospitality here is 1.8 million if you want to upgrade that. Boardroom is 400, weather center would be 1.5. So if you consider that, as well as the fact that these now are becoming more expensive, we are now running out of buildings that can boost mentality. And at this point, we need to get that mentality buff, mainly from, good race results, better than, expected. It is interesting, though, that Vashor is this happy with everything. He might be an actual really good option just because of that. So could be that this guy is the one to pick up, at least for your first season. But yeah, it is something that you need to keep in mind. And honestly, in this first year, as you can see, we have randomized contracts, so we'll be talking about this towards the end as well. But this is going to allow you to replace some of your staff in a very, very cheap way. Because if we go and say, look for someone that we can, the technical chiefs, let's say we want to replace our technical chief here. As you can see, currently no one is interested, but it won't be too long until we get some, basically, we can potentially snatch some of the higher rated ones, which is going to help the mentality issue a little bit as well. But with that said, the car is now very competitive. We'll be, of course, going back with the front wing and the rear wing. But for now, we're going to just simming as much as we can. So with Imola in 8 days, we now have our front wing done. And we're going to have this final edition done in time for the race itself. Now, keep in mind that once you have the front wing completed, you are going to want to put 6 engineers on your rear wing, as that's going to speed up your rear wing project. It's still not going to be here before, we go to, say, Monaco. But rear wing isn't important in Monaco. It's far more important in Canada. So getting it by then is actually kind of better. Now, with this in mind, we now do have a car that could, potentially vie for points. We haven't scored any yet, but if your drivers are just slightly better than these two, you probably have at least 1 point by now. Now, keep in mind, again, this is made when they're only doing suspension and underfloor, so you could be a little bit further behind because they're doing more things, put it like that. But you will still be able to be somewhat competitive, I would believe. If not, I will revisit this guide when they fix it, and we'll take a look then at what we can do differently. But for now, this should be a good way to kind of just get the parts you need to survive your first year, score a couple of points, and just happily kind of trundle along. Now, before we go into Imola here, you can see that this front wing that we have now is actually a pretty decent upgrade. It was 50 low Gs, 20 in medium and high, 30 air tolerance, and tire preservation. And that actually is going to bump our car up to the best low speed team there is, which is going to be pretty powerful, all things considered, particularly in Monaco, where we're probably going to score our first points. And we can actually see just how, where kind of how our car is expected to perform around the different tracks here. Apparently, Coda is our best track by, all margins, and Monaco is just 7th, but you get the idea. We now have a car that is fairly competitive, what it is, and we still are going to get that rear wing, get even more cornering, and that's going to be pretty amazing. It's still going to take 13 days, as mentioned, so we'll get it by Canada, but for now, we're going to sim through. But before that, I want to go over something else. As you can see, we have done 6 races. Currently, the season is split into 24, which means that every 6 race you'd want to probably change your gearbox and your engine, as well. You have 4 of them this year, which is amazing because 3 is too little. But because we choose to play with Mercedes, we actually have an engine and gearbox here that probably can survive 1 or 2 more races even before they really need replacing. And that is actually kind of huge because, again, we have more. If we crash, unless it's a devastating crash, we probably aren't going to need to buy an extra engine. We probably aren't going to need to buy an extra gearbox. And again, we're going to lose a little bit of performance because Mercedes is 90 power. But then again, the durability is worth it. The performance loss is worth it because we can definitely minimize all of our parts in exchange because we don't have to most likely spend 5 million on an engine somewhere. So I still feel like doing this is worth it. And again, I would really recommend just going with the Mercedes engine, at least your first season, and then maybe experiment with Red Bull or Ferrari in your second year. But with that, let us speed along here until we pick up that rear wing. So by the looks of it here, we have our first case of damage as, well, everything but Norris and Stroll. This is a weird one. So yeah, Norris and Stroll, the only cars that weren't lapped. But yeah, simulator here, we are down 7 laps. I assume that Behrman has picked up some sort of damage here, which is going to happen every now and again when you play this game. And we're just going to see here if he did. I would assume that he did. His mentality has definitely taken a hurt. As you can see, the ERS now is suffering major fault damage. And again, this is one of the problems with simulating races. Your components might suffer faults that you probably would not even get close to getting if you were manually in control. So do keep that in mind. We might need to switch out the ERS. We'll have to see in the next couple of races here if he's still somewhat competitive. But judging at the results here in the last race, I wouldn't be too sure about that. So keep that in mind. We are probably going to go ahead, though, and switch out the engine and the gearbox because, well, let's face it, the engine and gearbox have survived 1 race more than anticipated. So there's no problem in replacing those. But yeah, do keep that in mind. And as you can see here now, because of the results in Imola, he's basically lost a lot of his positives. And his mentality is going back to neutral 1, which is kind of bad for us because that means he's a lot more likely to crash the car. So if we have anything that we can give him a small buff with at this point, say upgrade the team hub once more, which honestly at this point we probably cannot because we need money to do the rear wing. So yeah, you can have some rough choices here with that, but honestly, it's no big deal. We'll try the ERS here, and if he still is, out of the points, we're just gonna have to, well, not really out of the points, below 18th. We're just gonna have to change out the ERS. And again, this is probably the bigger issue than they just straight up crashing in while you sim. It's straight up the fact that they'll pick up major faults on healthy components, and that's gonna be pretty bad for you. So as we can see here, Shaw qualified 12th, while we have Behrman down in 20th. So it seems like the ERS is slowing us down a little bit more than we can tolerate. So we're going to go ahead and switch it. Keep in mind, in this version of the game that I am making the video in right now, there's a bug when we do this. So Behrman is going to be punished by being put to the back of the grid. But since he's already 20th, that should not really be a huge concern. With that, let's simulate the race here and see if he improves his position somewhat. Looking at the fact that he was so far behind last race, it does kind of lend credence to the fact that the ERS fault is pretty severe. Unfortunately, he didn't even actually survive the race, and we might actually have a case here now where we need to deal with damage. And depending on how the crash was, potentially this could be one of the issues you'll be facing where your drivers are crashing and getting into a negative mentality loop. As you can see, his mentality is pretty bad. If we take a look at the crash here, it's pretty severe. But on the other hand, the only thing he damaged was actually the ERS, which puts us again in that kind of weird situation where Bearman might actually need 2 ERSs now to make it till the end of the year. He also did destroy the front wing, rear wing, and side pod, but there isn't really too much of a problem with that. It's mainly just making sure that, you know, you have enough parts. In our case, this happened fairly late on in the year, if you will. So, not really a huge deal. And we can easily replace these. The suspension here, we are already manufacturing. You had to manufacture the side pod. But as you can imagine here, the cost gap is going to be your biggest concern when we are dealing with this situation. So do keep that in mind. Rear wing isn't actually a problem either because we can get a new design in just 3 days. Let's go ahead and see what that has to offer. But yeah, if your drivers are crashing a lot, you might need to do a couple of races manually just to kind of put on the take no risks so that they do get the mentality up a little bit. Because if the mentality gets hit too hard, you'll see control and accuracy go down. And these two are pretty important for avoiding, you know, putting the car into the wall. Now with that said, let us look at our almost final design. We're still going to make one more. And we're actually just going to go ahead and make a couple of these rear wings because we want them for Canada. It is going to make the car a little bit more competitive. Again, these numbers aren't really accurate because other cars also have damage that they haven't replaced yet. But we are going to make one more rear wing design. And this is going to be the final one. And it is going to be looking pretty much the same as the other one. Do a couple of takes here so the rear wing can survive a couple more races. And this is going to bump us up quite a bit, all things considered. Put 6 engineers on it. And at this point, you can potentially start with doing a little bit of research. And apparently, we have lost some engineers somewhere. So that is a little bit worrying. I know what has happened here. So, a lot of people are saying, oh, I lose engineers. There's actually 2 ways you can lose engineers. You can send them on the STEM tour. But in our case, we're actually losing engineers because we have lost the design center effectiveness here. As you can imagine, we actually have gone down in engineer count because we're only running at 75% effectiveness because we're using it for some sponsor goals. So keep that in mind. There is actually negatives by using your design center in the sponsor plans. But at this point, Bearman's issues isn't really too big. But at the same time, we are probably going to need to maybe, just maybe, do a couple of races manually. I'm not going to. I'm going to still sim. But it might be something you need to do in order to just get his mentality back on the positive side. Because, let's face it, race retirement, race results doesn't really help with the mentality issue. And we are running out of facilities to upgrade. And at that point, this is going to become more of an issue. We're now getting the first wing on, the rear wing that is, as we are about to go into Canada. And as you can see, we do have a pretty... Our car is very competitive now in terms of the cornering ability. First, third, and fifth. And again, you as a player, if you do them manually, are probably going to perform better than this, because I'm pretty sure the top speed DRS effect is probably more powerful in simulation by what I've seen so far compared to some of the other runs. But yeah, at this point, the car is pretty good. We have an amazing cornering car. And unfortunately, we couldn't take advantage of Monaco, but we should be able to take advantage somewhere else. Austria is going to be pain because, well, it's just full speed all the way. Hungary we should be good at. Coda we should be good at. So, again, all we really need to do this first season is just to snatch a couple of points. And then we're basically guaranteed to get 9. So, things are still looking very, very good here. So, currently the way of setting up that sponsor plan, and as I mentioned earlier, the mandatory payout for the wind tunnel hire is happening right now. Sorry for that. And as you can see, that mandatory payout is the full engagement target, the 8.2 million. So if there is a contract symbol with the mandatory goal, it actually pays out everything at once. So over the course of this one, we're going to get 8.2 million extra payout. And this is going to be a huge buff that we can use to upgrade our buildings a little bit. That is basically what we are going to be doing here. Now, Bearman is still not very happy. We have yet to score points. We were once again 11th in Canada. But what we're going to start doing here is probably a little bit of upgrading of some of the other facilities. Operations, helipad, memorabilia, tour center, all these have been built. So getting a upgrade here to, say, the race sim and the team hub is definitely worth it because we are going to be getting a lot of money. Again, that 8 million is going to be paid out over this period. So that is going to be a nice infusion. Getting both of these up to develop both staff and also get the mentality, as well as getting the racing up and running, can be a really, really good thing to do. Let us continue. We are still waiting for that last rail wing. We're going to get it probably sometime after Austria, unfortunately. So we'll have it for Silverstone, which is actually a nice track to get it for. So it took us until Spain, but we have scored some good points there. Bearman did improve after a terrible quali, so at least that is good. And with this, we should actually have this season kind of in hand, and we'll definitely take that with us. If we look at the constructors now, we are up into 8th, which will keep the board happy. Saba also have some points, so they're still not safe, but it's looking a lot better already. And I would assume this is going to be a little bit of a buff here for Bearman. But again, Bearman is going to be in a negative mentality spiral for probably a couple more race weekends. We might be able to fix it in Austria a little bit. But yeah, this actually knocked it back to positive results. So that is looking good. Again, car performance of the staff. There isn't much you can do with that other than just improving your car and getting higher rated staff. That's basically about it. And honestly, we are probably going to be looking at new race engineers next year. So we do need to actually save up a little bit of money here. We have a new ATR period, and honestly, if you want to at this point, you're kind of free on what you want, what you can do. And what I mean by this is actually that, let's deal with this first. This is the Science Center still running at, no, it is running at 100% effectiveness. There's some bug here with the Science Center and the engineer capacity, so be careful with that. We have started a new sponsor goal, and if we are now permanently on 6 engineers, that's going to make our life a little bit harder. But generally, as what I want to say is that you can now do another design project. You can do a research project. It's going to heavily depend on the regulation change and where you are on the grid. But if you do another safety period, I would say invest into your suspension, as that is still another huge source of gains. In this case, we can do a suspension that looks somewhat like this, where we maximize tire preservation again. We lower the high and medium speed, maximize low speed. And here you're going to have a little bit of a choice if you want to maximize the cornering aspect as well. Because as you can see, you can get a lot of top speed here now from doing this. And you'll also be able to do a little bit more cornering. Because again, this is a CFD one. This is not the sassy you'll get on the second one. You'll still get a small boost in cornering and tire preservation. You can even sacrifice some of the tire preservation if you feel like it's, you know, too much. But you can get a loads of top speed from doing this design. But in our case, we aren't actually just aiming at surviving. So we're actually going to do research. And our first research project is probably not going to be the underfloor here. We'd probably do something like the side pod, which has cooling and airflow. But it's going to be up to you what you find to be more important. Anything that has airflow and cooling is apparently what we could hit with this year. So I'd probably still do the front wing, rear wing, and then maybe suspension with the 3 CFD periods we have remaining. So research is going to be a little bit more up to you, but again, it's going to be limited by money for one, and also a little bit about, you know, your goals for the season. You might want to go for suspension, you might want to go for research. If you're safe, I'd say slow down a little bit, do some research, and then save up some money till the end of the year so you can pick a better staff to have a mentally stronger team going into the next year. In our case here, we're just going to do the CFD on the front wing. We're going to do a little bit of everything because, again, the car performance does also scale off a little bit of tire, you know, cooling, airflow sensitivity. We can, of course, minimize, maximize, do as we see fit, but this should be a decent way to just get this research underway, and hopefully the car will look a little bit better next year. By the time we get to Silverstone, we have upgraded our race sim to level 2. We've also gotten the new rear wing and manufacture them. Yes. So if we slap these on the cars now, we can see that the car is a little bit quicker. And we're also going to go ahead and manufacture 2 more because we're going to need them later on. But we're still, again, in financial trouble. So do keep that in mind. Finances are going to be tough the first season. And at this point, the car is still really, really good. We still have low and medium speed. We're still lacking a little bit on the high speed aspect. That is mainly because the AI is developing only suspension and rear underflow at the moment. The underflow is a huge source of high speed cornering. When they balance things a little bit out, you are probably not going to be this strong at cornering versus the AI, but you should still be able to pick up the points that you need at the start of the season. And that's literally going to be everything you need to survive the first year. Now, there's another thing to keep in mind is that the finances, and I want to just go over this again really, really quick. So we're currently about to start the 12th race of the season, which is the halfway point, if you will. And if we go into the finances here, you can see that we have 31 million cost cap remaining. Now, if you bear with me, we started at 62 million. At the pace we're currently going, we're just about going to survive till the end. So at this point, we can't actually develop any more cars. We're just going to do probably 1 or 2 research projects for each path. Basically, that's going to be about it. And we still have to, pay the projected cost here for facilities. That's 5 million. But there's another thing that is very important to keep in mind with the remaining cost cap. In our case, we are definitely going to need to buy another ERS for Bearman. But that is probably also going to be the case here potentially for Bashir, although he has actually kept this ERS alive. It's at 40% when we're about to start the halfway of the season. So we're going to need at least 1 more ERS. That's 2.5 million. Probably going to need 2. That's 5 million off the cost cap. So do keep that in mind. You need to do Mercedes. Let's just be honest. We need Mercedes engines because anytime if we just buy one engine, that's us guaranteed to break the cost cap. Honestly, the first season challenge, the hardest first season challenge, is probably just going to be to finish it without breaking cap. At this point, though, mentality is looking good, mainly just because of race results, more so than anything else. And we should be able to keep this going now till the end of the season for the most part. But you could see dips here and there, and again, just taking manual control and having a little bit of better race result can definitely, do wonders there. But for now, I'm going to basically speed things up here. We have done everything we wanted, with the exception of starting a couple of research projects towards the end of the season. Probably not going to do any more development on the car. We're just going to make parts as they break, sim through the races, then we'll see where we stack up at the end of the year. So one of the problems that we were afraid of happening has actually happened here with Bearman. He's picked up another major fault with ERS, which means that we're probably going to have to pay a little bit out of pocket here in order to get that fixed. We are, however, speeding along. We have 8 races remaining, or rather we're about to have 8 races remaining. We actually have 9. But financially, we're still not looking too great. 2.5 million, 10% of our remaining budget, the third of the season to go, is not the best thing ever. And honestly, we haven't done any more research projects than just the one that we did for the front wing. And we might actually just end up not doing any more. Like do a rear wing project, research project with the CFD, and the same for the suspension. That might actually just be all that we have left to do. Now, also, I was a little bit wrong early in the video. I'll just mention this real quick. So, at level 1 design center, there's actually only allow you to get 6 engineers. For some reason, though, the game will start you off with 10. So that is why you will start off with 10. You'll fall down to 6. It might seem like a bug, but it really isn't. If we upgrade to level 2, as you can see here, we do get 4 more engineer capacity. So do keep that in mind. We also have actually a couple of good news. So our affiliate here, Corey, has actually been poached by Ferrari. So they will poach your drivers and staff, mainly those that are on a outward contract. And Edgerton here, or Egginton, has also been poached by Ferrari. And with that, we're actually going to try and do the counter poach and see if we get Cadil. Now, I kind of do believe I know around what Cadil wants, and usually it's around 4 million that you would have to pay to get him. We're going to go with next season. We're going to give him a 3-season contract, and we're probably just going to pay him an extra million or so just to sign with us. Cadil is such a high level that if he is enthusiastic, he is going to basically break our car. So it wouldn't be a terrible idea to get him. Get him 700,000 here. It's going to cost a lot of money to hire him. But honestly, he is kind of worth it. Like, getting the best staff when it comes to car development can be a huge buff. So, since he is somewhat interested, he was interested, he has a high patience for negotiation, we're going to try and pick him up. Now, generally, you'll have an easy time picking up those that have, in this case, very high patience. So do keep that in mind when you want to replace your staff with better ones for mentality. But he's going to also have a negative buff because he does not like our drivers. Like, none of our staff is really going to like our drivers. They're not skilled enough for them. So do keep that in mind as well. It's going to be something you're going to have to deal with on your second year, but I thought I'd just mention it here because it is actually an important facet. And as you can see at this point, we have gotten 18 points. So at this point, you should be fairly stable. So something that you're going to have to deal with before you go into your second season during your first is the fact that the AI will poach your staff. And in our case, they've actually poached this man, Zinelli. So as you can see, the contract length has changed to just 4 months. He's going to go to Aston Martin, which means that we need a new one. So how do we actually do this? Well, generally, you'd first go to head of aerodynamics. You see what you can find. In our case, Jared Murphy does seem like the best option, simply because of the fact that he has very high pace for negotiation. And that seems to indicate that they will accept, not as harsh terms as, for instance, you'd have to do to go for Honda. We actually do already have signed, interestingly enough. But we need a technical chief. There we go. I'm on the wrong side of the field, I believe. Let's just double check here. Sorry for the confusion. But it's actually fairly simple to sign staff. But I want to just double check here what I've done already. So yeah, he's actually going to Ferrari. And as far as I can see, we don't actually have a replacement yet. So we do need to deal with that. But both are car development personnel. We need to switch them out. They're going to be replaced by, they're going to a different team. Generally here, how you would start this off is by, in our case, again, we are going for Tondi, I believe. Why he is low in the negotiation or deal. Sorry, so here we're going to go for Murphy. And the best thing you should be doing first is just scouting them. Because the reason for that is very simple. We don't know what the demands is for one. But secondly, we have no idea, basically, how much it's going to cost to break that contract. We don't know how many years they have left. So go ahead and scout them first. Then we'll go into, discussing the contract itself. So as I mentioned, we tried to go for Cadil, but the problem here is that he actually has a 11 million, buyout clause. So we're going to have to just acknowledge this and respond later because we don't have money. But the Jared Murphy scouting is complete, and as you can see here, the buyout fee is just 500,000. He only has 3 months left, and his salary is currently 3.3 million. We can probably pick him up a little bit cheaper than that by taking advantage of a few things. For starters, we can go for, say, 4 seasons. We can have the start date be next season. Currently, the buyout fee here is insane. So he already have maybe a contract with another team. Yeah, he's agreed to go for another contract. So you can see that you might end up with a little bit of problems if they've already agreed to other contracts. So make sure you scout everyone before you go with, any particular deals here. So let's just dial back what I said about contracts. Generally here, I'm a little bit laid out in trying to get new staff. It should be done probably if you want to get to the best ones. You probably should start at when the summer break begins after Belgium. But in our case, as you can see, we have Neil Holdy. We have finally found someone who does not have a contract next year. And we can pick this man up for pretty cheap. He's also very skilled compared to our current one. So let's go through the contract that we can offer him. In our case, we're just going to give him a 4-year one, starting next season. Give him 300, or 3 million rather, not 300, as our current salary. And the best part is that for particularly your heads of aerodynamics, chief engineer, any basically staff that isn't a driver, you can just bribe them with a sign-on bonus. A pretty sizable one for sure, yes. But it's either that we go for a 700k sign-on bonus or we pay him every season 7.5 million. So the sign-on bonus at this point, currently, is pretty bonkers. You can do some pretty nice stuff with it. Like we just cut his paycheck by 1 million a year, and in exchange, we give him an extra 100,000 now. So this is a glitch you can currently take advantage of. You basically just kind of give them a huge sign-on bonus. Doesn't really have to pay any salary. The main thing you just need to care about is the buyout fee, which in our case is not going to be non-existent here. But you can, to some degree, cheese contracts at the moment. So do keep that in mind. You also do need to have them accept on the first try, because the contract bug is currently still in effect, but it should be fixed sometime next week. We are getting closer to the end of the year here, and in terms of our financial standing, we still have 14 million remaining on the cost cap, and if everything goes well, we'll be fine with just that one ERS purchase. Sadie's really helping us out here in order to survive. We've also only done one additional research at this point, which is actually just a suspension. So at this point, we could start considering doing a little bit of more research, as we're going to be losing about 2.3 more million from the facilities, bring us down to 11. Another 100k for the pit crew, 100k for the engineering team, half a million for staff salaries. So we basically have about 11 or so million remaining of the cost cap, I would assume. So unless we have some huge crashes here, now that we are going into the last 5 races, we should be fine. And honestly, at this point, when things are kind of settled with the standings, we can actually go and have a look at them. We are currently still 6th. Williams isn't really catching up. And to be fair, at this point, it would be better for us to actually finish 9th, so we get more CFD time next year. But at this point, the goal would just be to survive. So if any of our parts currently that are medium risk were to fail, we'll just go ahead and go to the earlier version. It's going to lose some performance, of course. But this late in the season, it doesn't really matter much. So unless we are fighting for, better points position, it's not really a huge issue to just take things a little bit slower and deal with them. We can also run parts that do have damage, but in Vashor's case here, we basically still have one more fresh gearbox with 5 races remaining. He even had a little bit of a smaller crash himself. We've been, for the most part, avoiding the worst powertrain issues. So we have actually been really, really lucky, and you can even see we still have 100% engine remaining for Behrman. So yeah, Mercedes powertrain here, while simming, has definitely, done a good job. We've had some minor incidents with some car damage for the most part, but powertrain components have been fine. So even if we had one big crash for both Vashor and Behrman, we'd probably be fine. The reason why we need an extra ERS is just because of the major damage and the way that it interacts with the sim. So yeah, we've actually had a pretty good run with it in terms of that sort of damage. So yeah, Mercedes. Pick Mercedes as your engine. Other than that, there isn't really too many other tips I would give. At this point, we have 30 million remaining. We can go ahead now and do a little bit of upgrades to our facilities. Probably also should do a little bit of refurbishment if we can afford it before we go into the next year. But honestly, I'd probably rather upgrade the hospitality area, because as I mentioned, it is kind of important to have that to be somewhat good before you head into next year. We're also going to be refurbishing some of the other things here. The weather center for now will be fine. Dealer room, again, the mentality buff is pretty important. So while it is costly to refurbish, we're going to go ahead and do so. And honestly here, rather than refurbish these two, we're probably just going to upgrade them once they fall a little bit further down the order, if you will. But we do have a lot of money, 11 million currently, that we aren't really spending on anything. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade the team hub. We do need a little bit of money going into next year, so maybe a little bit overkill. But I do want that mentality buff even higher. And lastly, we are going to go ahead here now and do a little bit of research, because it's going to be very, very nice to have next year. And in our case, we're just going to do the cooling and airflow for the chassis and the side pod, so that we don't lose too much of it. It is going to cost us a little bit of money to do this, of course, but these are quite important to get up, particularly the engine cooling and the airflow middle for both of them. So we're going to do a little bit of that research to minimize some of the losses next year. We still have one more CFD period. It might just straight up go into the underfloor. We are going to lose some airflow sensitivity here on the rear wing. We're going to lose some airflow sensitivity on the underfloor. But again, it does seem to be hyper important this year. So with the little money that we have, we are going to be fine with just ignoring that and not really doing too many research projects. We still have 2 months remaining. And once we actually get into December proper, we can then reevaluate with the money that we have. But we do also need to have some money in the bank going into next year. So it's a little bit of a rough choice at this point, but for now, we're going to simulate the last 5 races and then make some decisions, basically in the winter break, before we go into the second season. So with the money we had, I just want to reiterate, we did do a little bit of research here. 2 regular research projects, the chassis and side pods. We can honor those, but I did invest in the underfloor as well, focusing on the downforce mainly, as well as a little bit of airflow sensitivity. This is the CFD part, the final one of the year. And we are going to be doing a little bit more research come December, but honestly right now there isn't really that much to it. We also had another issue here last race where we have picked up yet another major fault, this time on the engine, but because again we are running Mercedes, we are going to be fine. There is just 3 races remaining at this point, so everything is looking very, very good. And we also had a bit of a surprise result last race out. For sure, I should manage to get a 4th place finish alongside you know, a little bit of a good score point there. So we'll take that. So the team is looking very, very good. We are not going to catch Mercedes, but we are firmly in 6th. I think we can be very, very happy with how things have gone this first season. Financially, we are still stable, and as I said, I'm just going to play a little bit slow here so we don't break the cost cap towards the end. But at this point, since we're not planning to actually make any more car parts, and we kind of got all of our contracts sorted, because go a little bit further down here, we have picked up Antonelli, 600,000, 550,000 signing bonus. We did get Holdy here, 2 million salary, 800 signing bonus. Again, just look for these guys, and you should be able to get them pretty cheap. Now, as I mentioned here, at this point, though, we can actually do as much research as we want. There's no real negatives to it. So I think what we actually do here is actually do a rear wing project where we do this. We're going to get a little bit of that dirty airbag, a little bit of cornering, a little bit of top speed. But as you can see, we aren't really getting a lot of stats here. And even that is, it is acceptable to do it 28th of December. And it should be fine. We still have money. And again, if we do have parts that fail at this point, we just put on older spec. We don't need any more points. Everything is good. So towards the end of the season, just stop manufacturing new ones. And if you need to, just go back to older spec parts. Because at this point, it shouldn't matter much to you. Now, with the money that we have left at this point, which is 7 million, we're actually going to go ahead and do one more set of research. We just had our side pods and also our chassis finish. And again here, we're just going to focus on the things that are getting kind of nerfed next year. Airflow middle, engine cooling for our side pod. It's going to be fairly important. And for the chassis, it is going to be probably actually beneficial for us to just get that engine cooling a little bit up next year as well. It's not going to be a huge buff or anything like that, but it is going to help us out a little bit. So let's just go and do it. And we might actually just do another underfloor as well. Though to be fair, it's probably not going to be a huge buff, but the underfloor is still one of the strongest parts. And it's also a lot cheaper to do than, say, do your wings again. Also, just a heads up, this is basically what your pit crew can look like by the end of the year. We've done a fairly good job here. Got a chance of error fairly far down. The estimated pit stop time. Just make sure that, again, the main goal here is just to get as close to 0% before you go into the race weekend. And you'll generally be fine. Give your boys a couple of days to rest afterwards. And then you can get back onto it. I will be making a pit crew guide again in this year's game because, well, it would be nice. But generally, as long as you don't switch components constantly, getting a good pit crew this year isn't necessarily a difficult thing. Keep in mind, though, that as you get closer to 550, your estimated pit stop time training is going to slow down by quite a lot. So do the estimated pit stop time later, get the error chance first down, then get working your pit stop times. But yeah, we have new staff. Everything has been sorted with the things we mentioned. We are actually still in Buddington and Adami. So that is kind of an interesting, pair. I did also start another underfloor research. So we haven't actually done too many research projects here this year. But we should be fine in the sense that most of our issues should be caught up on. So I'm just going to do Abu Dhabi. We've done everything that we can at this point. Going to finish this last race weekend. And then we'll see exactly where we stack up. So as you can see now, currently the car is fairly good, honestly. And I still can't get over the fact that we are 21st. So here we are, the end of the first season. 8th and 9th is what we finished in this race. Drivers-wise, we are 11th and 12th. Both the boys scored the same amount of points, interestingly enough. And both of them got away with just 1 DNF, which honestly is kind of huge. Now, we ended up 6 total here. Not too far behind Mercedes, but probably a little bit too far ahead of Williams and RB. So I could see this strategy being very viable too once they fix AI development sometime, hopefully next week. So I wouldn't be too worried about that prospect. Now, in terms of the parts here that I'm going to mention again is the fact that we haven't actually used too much of our powertrain. We still have a lot of engine left. The only reason why we had to buy another ERS here really is because of that issue. Because again, we would have been able to survive without it. And we even have an extra gearbox. Of course, if you have a couple of hard crashes, that's going to change pretty drastically. But Mercedes does seem to just be the best choice because you save a lot of money on that durability. And it's probably going to be an engine that or engine supply that I'll be using a lot this year just due to that. Now, other than that, there isn't really too much to say here. At the end of the year, we have survived with a little bit of research. Probably don't have as much money in the bag as we'd like to. So what I'm actually going to do here is that I'm going to go ahead and speed along until the start of next year as our team up gets upgraded. So just see how exactly the team is shaping up compared to the rest of the grid. And also if we can, get an engine supplier, everything set up without losing out too much. So let's just speed along to that point. So we're basically at the end of the season now, 30th of December, and we have actually survived with a little bit more in the cost cap than anticipated. We could have done 3 more research projects or, a wing, then something else. So 3 more research projects were doable by the end of this year, but you can definitely do a minimum durability build and survive, but it's going to limit what you can do in terms of research, in terms of other things. But as you can see, it worked out fairly well. And again, check the balance here. It doesn't take into account the fact that we had sponsor income, which was basically 90 million or close to it this year. So while we are supposed to have 66 million negative, we're actually 11 million positive. So yeah, I'd say we've done a decent job here. Now, I do want to, as I mentioned here, take a look at how things are looking next year. So that is exactly what we can do now as we get a little bit more money from our sponsorships and everything. And our team marketability, that started at, I think, 260-ish. That's gone up to 560 here. And you can kind of see that we have definitely outdone the funding. We have been paid out more than we were supposed to from the race targets. We've gone 7 million, over that. So getting a high race target funding could be extremely good for your team. I'll just put it like that. DHL, we ended up 11th, which, it doesn't pay out a lot of money. That isn't really a huge deal. Again, the pick retraining isn't really a problem. We also did actually beat the long-term objective, interestingly enough. And our team principal rating and the team rating gets a little bit of an upgrade, which should help with our current marketability. It's supposedly 486 at the moment instead of 560-ish that we saw. We'll have to see exactly how this actually plays out next year. I guess maybe the buffs that we didn't see actually fully took effect. Now, we do actually boost our safety time next year because we did have a change to the wind tunnel allocations, which is honestly pretty good. And also the minor technical airflow and cooling regs here has done probably a little bit of a number on a car, but we'll take a look at the start of the new season. But surviving your first season while being within cost cap is basically just a question of, you just have to make one set of upgrades basically, and then CFD basic gear from wing, rear wing, and underfloor, and it should be easy sailing. So there is some concerns there mainly, but it shouldn't be huge. Balance wise, mentioned here, we have actually ended up at negative 10 million because of car development, I guess. 2024 balance for payments. Yeah, we need to, if we start with 10 million in negatives next year, that's going to suck a little bit, but we'll have to just deal with it the best we can. Suspension here, the research definitely is going to make our car faster next year. The underfloor here, same thing. For the side pods, we are going to be losing a little bit of the airflow middle, but the cooling is going to be better. For the rear wing, losing a lot of the airflow sensitivity or dirty air. For the front wing, just a generally big boost all around, so we'll take that. Just a little bit of boost in the airflow front, but that's still acceptable. And similarly to what we saw on the side pods here, we're losing a little bit of the airflow middle. But all in all, considering the finances that we had, I think we can be very happy with how that research has gone. And we are going to stick with Mercedes engines again, because we are still financially compromised. And in this second season, your goal probably should be to focus a little bit more on upgrading your actual car facilities. So here we are, start of the season. We can't really develop anything. I don't know when exactly we picked the sponsorships, but we'll take a look at that in a second. The crew performance, it has degraded to 73, 55, 50 on the speed. Not really a huge degradation, I would think. And since we do have a lot of time at the start of the season, getting it back to where we were should not be an issue. Other than that, ATR allocations, again, not really a huge deal. Pit crew performance, driver development update. We can actually sponsor negotiate immediately on our second season, which is going to be huge. Let's see what we can do. So we actually have the same sponsor as we had last year. Ferro NRG. Bella is a new one, but I think we're just going to stick with this one. It's probably our best bet because race day seems to pay out the best. And now we actually have more options here in our second year on how we're going to do with the how we're going to deal with the finances here. So we're going to gamble on the MMOX. We're going to get Raka in here like last year. We are going to just be looking for loads of generally just race day funding because it did pay out pretty well for us last year. So we're going to gamble in it this year again. We are going to be picking Euro Binary Exchange because we need more upfront funding because we only have 10 million. We need to make a new car before the first race. And other than that, we could potentially go for Lemura here again. And I think having a little bit more upfront would be good. The problem there is the non-race appearance that is going to lower development rate and drive mentality for a while. It could backfire horrendously, but I think it is one that we are just going to have to go with here because of the fact that, well, we kind of need to. So we can immediately edit our everything, but currently it is looking good. Mentality is enthusiastic now because of the staff changes that we've done. Adami, though, is not happy. The car, staff, drivers, stabilities, everything is pretty, terrible. Same here for Bono. So, while our drivers are enthusiastic, which honestly probably are the most important, aspect to keep enthusiastic, the race engineers are also important, don't get me wrong. But, yeah, there is definitely some issues here to contemplate. And he's actually happy with his contract salary, although I do feel like we kind of almost scammed him a little bit. But yeah, looking at it from this point, I do think that just surviving your first season is pretty straightforward and simple. You just have to be a little bit more careful with your money. You have to accept the fact that you're not going to be fighting for much more than 9th and 10th. You just need to score a couple of points your first year if you do have the worst start. If you, of course, start somewhere else, it's going to be a little bit different, but we'll get into that once we, maybe if someone needs a guide on that, once everything has been fixed, we'll dive into that. But for now, that has been it for this quick little surviving your first season without breaking the cost cap, basically. Hope you've enjoyed. If you did like this, we might revisit for the second season. But yeah, let me know what you think. Did I forget something? Is there any questions? Feel free to ask. If you did enjoy this, please do like, subscribe. Helps me out a ton. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.